Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and I'll be delivering both the Washington Report and the call to action. Let's get right to it. The House is in recess and will not return until September. The Senate will return today and stay in session through Thursday, or possibly longer, depending on how determined Majority Leader John Thune is to get Trump nominees confirmed. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Last week in the House came back on Monday and took up and passed two bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday, the House took up and passed another two bills under suspension of the rules. On Wednesday, the House took up and passed another two bills under suspension of the rules. And then they were done, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. Last week in the Senate came back Monday and voted to end debate on the nomination of Terrence Cole to be Administrator of Drug Enforcement. On Tuesday, the Senate voted to confirm him to that position. Then the Senate voted to confirm Joshua M. Devine to serve as U.S. District Judge for the Eastern and Western Districts of Missouri, and Christian M. Stevens to serve as U.S. District Judge for the Eastern District of Missouri. Then, because the Democrats are doing everything in their power to delay and block the confirmation of Trump nominees, the Senate took up and passed a motion to proceed to executive session so they could consider Emil Bove's nomination and the Military Construction Veterans Affairs Appropriations Bill. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the motion to proceed to the Milcon VA Appropriations Bill. Then the Senate voted to confirm Aaron Lucas to be Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. And then the Senate voted to confirm Bradley Hansel to serve as Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. On Wednesday, the Senate voted to confirm the nominations of Ariel Roth to serve as Assistant Secretary of Communications and Information at the Department of Commerce, and John Hurley to serve as Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Crimes at the Department of the Treasury. Then the Senate voted to agree to the motion to proceed to consideration of H.R. 3944, the Military Construction Veterans Affairs Appropriations Bill. Then the Senate voted to end debate on and then to confirm the nomination of Zachary M. Bluestone to serve as U.S. District Judge for the Eastern District of Missouri. Then the Senate voted to confirm Aaron Szabo to serve as an Assistant Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. And then the Senate voted to end debate on the nomination of Matthew Lohmeyer to serve as Undersecretary of the Air Force. On Thursday, the Senate voted to confirm him to that position. Then the Senate voted to end debate on and then to confirm the nomination of Richard Topping to serve as Chief Financial Officer of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the nomination of Emil J. Bove to serve as U.S. Circuit Judge for the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. And then they were done. This week in the Senate will return today with the first vote set for 5:30 p.m. At that time, the Senate will proceed to a roll call vote to end debate on the nomination of David Wright to serve as a member of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. If cloture is invoked on the nomination, there will be up to 2 hours of debate prior to a vote on confirmation of the Wright nomination. Following disposition of that nomination, the Senate will vote on the motion to end debate on the nomination of Earl Matthews to serve as General Counsel of the Department of Defense. Then, based on the Majority Leader's cloture filings, I anticipate we'll see votes on the nominations of David Wright to serve as a member of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Earl Matthews to serve as General Counsel of the Department of Defense, William Kimmett to serve as Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, Susan Monarez to serve as Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and Sam Brown to serve as Undersecretary of Veterans Affairs for Memorial Affairs. And Senate Majority Leader Thune is threatening to cancel all or at least part of the August recess if he doesn't get more cooperation from Senate Democrats in confirming President Trump's nominees. There are now 144 Trump nominees at the desk. That's Senate slang for waiting to be confirmed. Of those 144 nominees who have been vetted by their relevant committee of jurisdiction and have received a favorable vote from the committee, 33 of them are nominees waiting to be confirmed and sworn in as ambassadors. That's 33 countries around the world where the U.S. has interests, but the president does not have an ambassador, just because Senate Democrats are determined to use the few weapons they have against President Trump to slow down the implementation of his agenda. Remember, because of a few changes to the rules back in 2013 and 2017, except for all Supreme Court nominations and cabinet secretaries and a few other very high nominees, very highest level nominees of the executive branch, all nominations can be disposed of with just 2 hours of debate. That's as long as the minority party can stall things now. But they can do that on every single nomination if they want, and they have been. President Trump is the first president ever to go this far into his term without a single one of his nominees being confirmed by unanimous consent. Senate Democrats have insisted on a vote on every single one of them, and that uses up valuable floor time. So Senate Minority Leader Schumer is playing a game of chicken with Majority Leader Thune. We'll see which one blinks first. Now to a new Tea Party Patriots Action poll. On Tuesday, Tea Party Patriots Action released the results of a new survey conducted for the organization by John McLaughlin, one of President Trump's pollsters. I've worked with John for more than 30 years now, and I can vouch for him. He's one of the best in the business. We wanted in this survey to take the opportunity to gauge public opinion on just a few key issues. Here's the main takeaway. A vast majority of likely voters say they oppose amnesty for illegal aliens, and a majority support deporting every illegal alien. Here are the questions and the responses. First, the Department of Homeland Security added a simple star to identification cards and driver's licenses to indicate that the document is a real ID. Would you support or oppose the federal government requiring the addition of a simple identifier on real IDs to indicate whether an individual is a U.S. citizen or not? 65% support, 22% oppose. That's 82% among Republicans, 54% among independents, and 57% among Democrats. Second question. Voters should be required to provide identification when voting, including when casting absentee, mail-in, and overseas ballots, to ensure that the person is who they claim to be. Do you agree or disagree? 79% agree, 15% disagree. Among Republicans, 89% agree. Among independents, 76% agree. Among Democrats, 70% agree. Third question. Proof of United States citizenship should be required to register to vote in American elections. Do you agree or disagree? 83% agree, 13% disagree. Among Republicans, that's 92% agree. Among independents, it's 82% agree. And among even Democrats, it's 73% agree. Fourth question. It is neither fair nor right to allow a particular group of illegal immigrants to jump in the line and be awarded the benefits of legal status and a potential pathway to U.S. citizenship before the hundreds of thousands of potential legal immigrants who have followed the law and waited in line for years. Do you agree or disagree? 77% agree, 13% disagree. Among Republicans, that's 86% agree. Among independents, it's 71% agree. And among Democrats, it's 71% agree. Fifth and final question. Some people advocate for deporting only those illegal aliens who have committed heinous, violent crimes and allowing amnesty for those illegal aliens with jobs. In contrast, Others advocate for deporting those who entered the country illegally because they broke the law as their first act in America and cut in front of the immigrants waiting to enter legally. Considering this, do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Everyone who has entered the country illegally, regardless of what additional crimes they may or may not have committed while in America, and regardless of their employment status, should be deported. 56% agree, 34% disagree. Among Republicans, it's 79% agree. Among independents, it's 53% agree. Among Democrats, it's 33% agree. Now let's talk about new trade deals. On Tuesday, President Trump announced a new trade deal with Japan, our fifth largest trading partner in 2024. Last year, trade between the two countries amounted to $321 billion. That includes $129 billion in U.S. exports and $192 billion in U.S. imports from Japan. Under the terms of the new deal, according to the president, Japan will invest $550 billion in the U.S., which Trump said will receive 90% of the profits. The deal, he said, would create hundreds of thousands of new jobs. Japanese imports to the U.S. will face a 15% tariff. Trump called it, quote, the largest trade deal in history, unquote. On Sunday evening, from Scotland, President Trump announced a second trade deal with the European Union, our single largest trade partner, with whom the U.S. did more than 3 times as much trade in 2024 as we did with Japan. The number is huge. We did $975 billion in trade with the European Union last year. That's composed of $370 billion worth of U.S. exports to the EU and $606 billion in U.S. imports from European countries. The new agreement will impose a 15% tariff on goods imported into the United States from the union of 27 European nations, similar to the tariff imposed on imports from Japan. Trump said that as part of the deal, the Europeans had agreed to purchase $750 billion of energy products from the United States and invest an additional $600 billion in the U.S. Now let's talk about the next rescissions package. A few days after President Trump signed a $9 billion rescissions package clawing back funding for foreign aid and public broadcasting, his budget hawks are looking at developing a second rescissions package targeted at clawing back education funding. Both Politico and Daily Signal carried pieces on the subject Tuesday, but neither said when the package would arrive on Capitol Hill or what the amount would be. According to the Politico piece, Speaker Johnson has told Republican colleagues that he expects the second package will not be as large as the first. At a recent media briefing, OMB Director Russ Vought, the architect of the rescissions strategy, told reporters there's about $7 billion of education funding still under review by the White House. Quote, these are the programs that we have some of the gravest concerns with regarding the education department, he said last week. Quote, you have a preschool program that doesn't do any preschool funding. All it does is indoctrination of 4-year-olds of critical race theory. You have school improvement programs that are indoctrinating teachers to be cultural revolutionaries in the classroom. So we have concerns with these programs. So they're the ones that we're going to study the most. End quote. Now to the latest on Russia and Ukraine. In Scotland, earlier today, meeting with the British Prime Minister, President Trump declared he was even more disappointed with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and was shortening the timeline for Putin to make peace with Ukraine. When last we heard from President Trump, on July 14, Trump said he would give Putin 50 days to come to the table seriously, which would have been September 2. But as of today, the president indicated he would move the deadline for action up to early August, quote, about 10 or 12 days from today, unquote, he said, adding, quote, we just don't see any progress being made, end quote. Now to the latest on the Epstein Files fallout. The Epstein Files story moved forward on multiple fronts last week. First, on the House floor front. Second, on the media narrative front. Third, on the House committee front. And fourth, on the ongoing investigation front. First, the Epstein Files, more specifically what to do about them, brought the House of Representatives to a screeching halt last week. On Monday afternoon, as the Rules Committee was planning to meet to craft the rule that would lay out the parameters of the floor debate over the week's legislation, as it regularly does on Mondays before Tuesday votes, Republican members of the committee let the House GOP leadership know that they weren't going to take votes to kill Democrat amendments calling for release of the Epstein Files. The meeting stalled for several hours as leaders debated what to do. As they saw it, they had three options. They could give up on moving legislation to the floor with a rule for the rest of the week. They could vote on a rule that included some of the Epstein language from the leadership-authored, non-binding resolution from the previous week, but even the leaders were worried it would fail on the floor. Or they could bully their way through the Rules Committee meeting, forcing their Rules Committee members to vote down the Democrat-sponsored Epstein amendments. But the rule was going down anyway, so why subject your members to a bad vote? The choice was clear. Cancel the Rules Committee meeting and give up on moving anything that needed a rule. Instead, the House voted on measures that were brought up under a suspension of the rules, as we discussed earlier, 6 separate measures over 3 days. Then they went home a day early to begin their August recess. Second, the media narrative was advanced with a follow-up to the previous week's Wall Street Journal exclusive report that for Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday, his friends had put together a book of what the journal called bawdy letters, and one of them had come from Donald Trump, which Trump denied and sued over. In the follow-up story, which was published a week after the original story, the journal, again exclusively, reported that others who had sent letters for inclusion in the 50th birthday book included Bill Clinton, Wall Street billionaire Leon Black, fashion designer Vera Wang, and media owner Mort Zuckerman. Third, a House Oversight Subcommittee on Wednesday voted by 8-2, with 3 Republicans crossing party lines to vote with Democrats to subpoena the Justice Department to release the Epstein Files. The subpoena will be issued in the future, according to a spokesman for the full committee. Those files would be reviewed by the committee and would not be released to the public. In addition, subpoenas will be issued to former President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, former FBI directors James Comey and Robert Mueller, and former Attorneys General Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder, Merrick Garland, William Barr, Jeff Sessions, and Alberto Gonzales as part of an investigation into Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is serving a 20-year sentence for child sex trafficking. And fourth, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche spent 9 hours over 2 days on Thursday and Friday interviewing Maxwell in Florida. We don't know what they talked about. Now to the Jenny Beth Show. Episode 131 of the Jenny Beth Show dropped last week, featuring Jenny Beth's conversation with Anne Marie Morell, who's recently published a new book called Walking Each Other Home, a caregiver's journey of grace, about her journey from the glamorous life of Hollywood back home to become the full-time caregiver for her aging parents. As always, it's highly recommended. And that's our Washington report for this week. Now to the call to action. Actually, we're still doing multiple calls to action. There's a lot going on in Congress, and we need your help on multiple fronts. On the front page of our website at teapartypatriots.org, that's teapartypatriots.org, you'll find a Take Action tab. There you'll find a page with all kinds of detail on different actions. We still need your help urging the Senate to move forward and move faster on confirming Trump nominees. As we just discussed, there are now 144 Trump nominees waiting to be confirmed, and we need the Senate to move on them. And we need your help preparing for our Only Citizens Vote bus tour next month. Please sign up to let us know you want to help us make the SAVE Act a reality. And we need your help in opposing the so-called Dignity Act, which is a nice name for what it really is, an amnesty bill by another name. So please call your congressman or congresswoman and tell him or her to oppose the Dignity Act and its amnesty for illegal aliens. Well, that's our broadcast for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Please take a moment to share this broadcast with your Facebook friends and post it to your other social media accounts. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, be well and be active.